Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today as we kick off the first ever UN 2.0 week, a week dedicated to the Secretary-General's vision for a forward-looking United Nations system and what we can do to realize it. I'm Tanya Okoni, Senior Advisor on Innovation at UNICEF, and I'm more than excited to be your host today. Remember, we have a whole week full of flagship events, so please stay tuned. I'm delighted to welcome Deputy Secretary-General Amina Mohammed and Under-Secretary-General Ryder for a conversation around UN 2.0. It's a great opportunity to speak with our senior leaders and to get their insights on what this all means. But let's kick it off first with some words from the Secretary-General himself, unpacking the big picture vision behind UN 2.0.
Our world today is confronted by crisis after crisis. Conflicts, climate catastrophe, poverty, inequality, and stalled progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. The world looks to the United Nations to help build the better, safer, greener world we need. But we cannot solve 21st century problems with 20th century tools. We need a UN 2.0, a strengthened and updated United Nations built around a quintet of change. Data, innovation, digital solutions, strategic foresight, and behavioral science to better reach and support the people of the world. And a new forward-thinking culture at the UN, powered by the rapid technological advances all around us, especially as we move forward on the fundamental changes proposed in our common agenda and the Summit of the Future. We are already seeing what is possible, from online resources for remote schools, to humanitarian aid based on real-time data and technology that helps countries forecast and build resilience to disasters. Ultimately, UN 2.0 will make us better partners for countries as they achieve results for their people. Change is never easy, but change is essential. Together, let's embrace UN 2.0 and deliver the dynamic and innovative solutions our world needs.
We've just heard from the Secretary-General, UN 2.0 means everyone, everywhere, no matter where they are in the United Nations system. Through this next conversation with the DSG and the USG, we'll unpack what is UN 2.0, why is it necessary and valuable, what's happening next, and where have we come, how far have we come. So DSG, let's turn it over to you and ask you the big question, what is UN 2.0?
Well, UN 2.0, I'm really excited about this, so thank you very much. It's a long time coming, and when we first thought about all the components of our common agenda, what was really important to us is at the center of this are the people of the UN. And so for us, UN 2.0 is our response to how we will pivot and meet the world where it's at and where it needs to go with our staff, and thinking about what that means for investing in our staff, but attending to many of the quintet of change issues that you hear about. So the behavioral science that needs to go into this, because we really do have to change the way we are wired and think about the responses and the support we give. But it's also about innovation. It's about data. It's about the digital part of the work that we do. And it allows everyone to think about these and how they interrelate. It's about strategic foresight. There is no way that we cannot be thinking into the future when in fact a lot of what we do today affects that, and I think there's more acknowledgement of that. Things are very different. The crises and the complexities that we're dealing with today are not what we were designed for. So while we're attending to some of those structural issues, the most important asset is us and how we do this and the tools that we're given to make that so. So I hope what it will do is make us more fit for purpose, that we can actually get out there and raise the ambitions and be more responsive for the needs.
And I hear a common theme through what you've just unpacked, which is how the UN is future-focused, how it is future-proofed. And I'm wondering, USG Ryder, you are someone who is focusing right now on bringing to life the Summit of the Future. And I'm wondering, when you look at that perspective of the Summit, how do these changes fit into that?
I think they fit in very centrally. It's worth remembering, this is not accidental, by the way, that the Summit of the Future and UN 2.0 share common origins, our common agenda of the Secretary-General. He proposed a Summit of the Future, and he proposed the UN 2.0 agenda as a way, as the DSGs just said, of making the UN fit for purpose in delivering on the ambitions of the Summit of the Future. So I think it's almost common sense. In a world that's becoming more complicated, we're dealing with complex problems, and we're in a time of extraordinary technological change, which gives us fantastic opportunities, fantastic potential. I think it's almost self-evident that the UN has to be top of the league, if I can put it like that, in all of these capabilities in these 5 areas of innovation, of data, of digital, of strategic foresight, and of behavioral science. And I think we're equipping ourselves to walk the talk, if I can put it like that. Can you imagine an effective multilateralism? The Summit of the Future, when you bundle it all together, is about making multilateralism deliver better. It's difficult to imagine us realizing that goal unless we really do reach the levels that we need to in these 5 areas of capabilities. We're not at the beginning of this story. I think we've got a lot of good things that we'll be showcasing during the week ahead. That's right. But I do see this week as a bit of an accelerator. I don't know if you agree, DSG. Make sure that we go, the way I look at it is going from retail to wholesale. I mean, we've got to go from the anecdotal to the systemic. We're on the way, but I think that this week's going to really help us move forward.
Oh, fantastic. And, I'm curious, when we look at, as you said, systemic, taking a look at the entire UN family, from your perspective, DSG, beyond the kind of the summit itself and beyond that momentum, that clearly things are happening, we're not kicking things off from zero. This change is needed for so many reasons. Are there others, from your perspective, are really other drivers that push us to really want to put 2.0 at the heart of what we're doing, especially as UN staff?
Probably 2 sides that I would look at. First of all, we've got the unfinished business of the SDGs. We still have to get there by 2030. This comes at a right moment because so many things have changed since we gavelled this in 2015. And a lot of our work that was done then up here with policy and norms and standards and shaping this with member states now has to be implemented in the countries that we are serving. And that's a big change, to look at an integrated agenda and see so many of the things we're grappling with today with conflict that's so very different, but also climate change, with governments that now democracy is a big challenge to them. And so we're seeing many systems of governance fail and rights be backtrack. So we do need to do things differently on the ground even now. So 2.0 has come at the right time. And then the other side, I would say, is that we are dealing with huge cohorts of young people. We're dealing with a trend and a trajectory that's going to put the majority of our population worldwide in cities. That's a different dynamic. But we're also dealing with this new era of technology and how you can use that not to be left behind, but actually to leapfrog in some instances with education. Again, as we spoke to data, to the digital, to innovation in agriculture, in many of the skills that young people are looking to, the creatives that are a big part of GDP. We've not done that kind of work before. So, allowing us to repurpose ourselves and bring a younger cohort into the UN as well that understand this perhaps better is an opportunity that we're looking at. I'm also really excited about what we will do with our colleagues, our stakeholders at the country level. The UN 2.0 is not just about we, the UN, because that UN goes beyond the staff. It goes to all of those partners that we have in the field, in the humanitarian development, in peacekeeping. These are all important parts of what we're going to do. So unpacking that this week, I think for all of us is going to be a learning. And I hope that what we'll take about it is a huge engagement in making sure that when we see that change, we see the results and the impact in people's lives and the work that we do at the country level.
Absolutely. And I know, USG, you speak to a lot of member states, and you have in recent months had the opportunity of introducing this whole idea in conversations with member states. And you've just mentioned what a critical key stakeholder and raison d'etre they are to our work. What are sort of some of the responses or conversations that you've been having? How do member states react and respond to this idea of us recharging, refreshing, re-equipping ourselves for the future that is essentially on our doorstep?
Yeah, I think at a moment when there's an awful lot of division and controversy out there with member states, UN 2.0 is actually one issue where there seems to be unanimous support and acceptance, and it's not difficult to see why. I think all of our member states want to see this effective United Nations, this capable United Nations, because it moves our agenda forward, but it also means the quality of the services that we deliver to member states, which is after all our mission, will be improved correspondingly. So I think this is an unambiguously positive message. They want us to move forward with this, and I think they absolutely see the case that has been made. I do think that as we're improving our own capacities in this quintet of change, we have to think, and maybe looking forward, how to make sure that our member states equally get the benefit of this in their own national activities. It's about building capabilities not only for ourselves, it is about ourselves in the first instance, but also making sure that our member states are also able to invest and to benefit from these things. And as I said, at a time of extraordinary change, at a time when technologies are offering these fantastic potentials for policy making and delivery, we're definitely on the right track, and I think that is very well recognised, which means there's a high expectations that we get on board this agenda, that all of us inside the UN become part of this forward movement. And that's what our week is going to try and help us do.
Absolutely. And I'd love to hear a little bit, maybe from both of you. We'll start with you, DSG. What are any particular potentials that you're excited about, or at the same time things that you feel, are things maybe like artificial intelligence or, data or data responsibility, things that we should be paying particular attention to? And then we'll ask the same question of you, USG.
I think what's important today in a world where things are so much more connected, more complex, and also that we are losing faith in institutions, in governance, in the social contract, things are pretty miserable. And so bringing this back and re-injecting hope, amplifying all the things that are the opportunities and asking us to put the guardrails to protect the good that can come out of it. So when I think of the Digital Compact, I think of all the tools that it will enable in education, how women will be able to become much more connected with financial services and their agency, perhaps in agriculture and food systems, or maybe even in the creatives. But how do I make sure that everything that they put on a system is protected and not used against them to exclude them? We're learning an awful lot, Guy, myself, the SG, as we go through this advent of AI, and then it'll be quantum computing and probably way past our generation. But what we are learning is that exponentially these things are going to happen fast. They already are. And so can we make sure that we're not taking the time that we do too little too late? That we really have to be ready to do this. This is why the Quintet of Change picks up strategic foresight, because if you're going to be innovating and you're going to be using digital and data, what for? And I think if we as the UN are ready for that, then I think that we've picked up the speed that we're needed to be, if not ahead, at least abreast of it. So it does give me hope that all that we're asking for now puts us in a position of thought leadership, of knowledge and sharing and empowering and accompanying. I think it's very important that we are meeting people where they are and carrying them forward with the potentials that we have now. The risks abound everywhere, and I think if we go down those rabbit holes of risk, we'll be in trouble. So I think what we have to do is just to say, how do we push that back and increase that space of opportunity and engagement and inclusion, and make sure that we're just not leaving anyone behind. And as I said earlier, it is the SDG framework that's still to do, that allows us to pull people around the table to say, well, this is something we agree on. We can use what everyone feels is useful to do that. Having said that, Quintet of Change, very rarely does everyone embrace change. But I think what we're doing in this week is really unpacking it, so there's no fear of it, no fear of loss, but fear of gain, and that we're going to be more empowered and better able to face the world that is so more complex, and that only a multilateral setting, only this global village can help to work through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you're picking up there in terms of that equity and that opportunity to accelerate progress where perhaps it is not, where there's a lot to be gained in a short period of time. So that acceleration opportunity is really incredible and incredibly exciting. So USG, your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, your question brings me straight back to the Summit of the Future and how all of this fits together. In the Global Digital Compact, which is going to be annexed to the pact that we hope to adopt in September, there is a very clear reference to the need to, of course, take fullest advantage of the potential that technological change gives the world, particularly to deliver on the SDGs, as the DSGs just said, but not to close our eyes to the downside risks. They're there. And I could put those risks in perhaps 2 or 3 buckets. One, of course, is around human rights, data privacy, issues as that, making the digital space a safe and secure place, protecting against misinformation and disinformation. All of those things are being contemplated in the Global Digital Compact. I think there's another bucket that we need to look at of risks, which is that the benefits of technology be distributed in a very unequal and unfair way. This would actually, and counterintuitively if you like, be a way of leaving people further behind than they already are, and we need to make sure that that does not happen. So that's in the outside world perspective. How does that relate to what we're doing in UN 2.0 and our own organisation? Leave nobody behind. This, as the SG has said, is about everybody. UN 2.0 is about everybody wherever they work in the United Nations. And there's my concern. I mean, the week is about increasing awareness, engaging people. I also think it's about getting people on board in the sense that this means you too. As you said, change can be scary for people. They might think that they're going to lose out in the change in one manner or another. They might think that they don't have the capacity to be a UN 2.0 person. I think we have to say and to demonstrate through training, through engagement, through understanding of what we're about, that this means you too in a very positive way. And I think that our week, as I've said before, is going to contribute to that.
Okay, absolutely. And I think we have this incredible opportunity with our colleagues who are in every country on the planet to demonstrate that change that we are seeing and everyone is experiencing in the world, and really show how we can be exemplars of making that change journey sort of successfully. But I would love to spend just a moment on talking about people. Can you say a little bit more about, how should we be thinking about people? How is all of us, as being one of those UN staff and all of the tens of thousands who are going to be participating this week, what can we do? What should we be thinking about? What's the one thing that I should seize and decide in 2024, I'm going to do that because I'm inspired about this 2.0 vision?
I think with speaking to people, we've got strong foundations. Since the Secretary General's come in, one of the focuses he's put on it is on women. And I think women's leadership has come through now, not only that we have parity in our leadership across our departments, our funds and programs, and that's huge. That's not happened before, and it's made a great difference to the way in which we're leading in the UN. So consolidate on that and build on it. And we did have a number of our women leaders here in International Women's Week to speak about this and to speak about UN 2.0. The other part is that in the field, our resident coordinators in 131 countries is 50% parity. So here we've got equal numbers, and so women again, how can we ensure that their leadership, the thought leadership, the changes that need to happen, when we say leave no one behind, put a woman in a position and you do see the whole village come, right? Not just the chief. So I think that we've got a big opportunity there. The other part of our family is the young people. For the first time, the Summit of the Future, we have had the youth office in place after 75 odd years. I mean, goodness me. And so that the ASG for youth, I think he's going to be in an enormously important position to bring the voice of young people and perhaps to help the rest of the system change. Because I think that's what we need to do in this week, is that we need to pull each other up and to show perhaps pathways that some of us have no clue. But when we look at the Quintet of Change, I think that that's what's inspiring each and every one of those changes that we require to be ahead of with the frameworks that we have, be it our charter or the human rights or the SDGs. It's plenty for us. But start to, look to see how women step up into this space. They're there, and we need to do that. And maybe last but not least, on the Leave No One Behind, we are doing a lot of work in inclusion, and in the system, I think one of the areas that perhaps we need to fast track is that of bringing those with disabilities into this conversation. We've done well in putting all the frameworks and the policies, and we've even increased the employment. And I'm happy to say that even with our resident coordinator offices, we've had that happen. But this is something that, change means that the whole of our diversity will be seen to be moving forward together. So again, yes, on the outside we say leave no one behind, but on the inside, let's just make sure we know who those no ones are and pull them forward.
I love that. It's really inspiring, and I want to thank you both, DSG and USG, for sharing your insights and perspectives on UN 2.0. I think you've given us lots to think about, but also a real opportunity to act. Next, let's take a look at the impact that can be realized by applying UN 2.0 capabilities in the field. Here's Innovation in Action, one of UN 2.0 Quintet of Change.
My name is Sylvia Kezengwa. H2Grow is WFP's hydroponic initiative, a climate-smart, soilless cultivation method that uses 90% less water, 75% less space, and its growth cycle is 8 times faster than using conventional methods, enabling vulnerable communities to access food all year round. WFP is scaling hydroponics using innovative financing to increase access and affordability of hydroponic technology in Kenya.
Behavioral science is one of the quintet of change for UN 2.0. Let's take a look.
Hola, soy Juan Martín Bustos de la oficina del OIT en la Argentina. Acá trabajamos estrechamente con el gobierno usando ciencias del comportamiento para promover el trabajo decente entre las trabajadoras domésticas, de limpieza y cuidados. Hoy 8 de cada 10 de esas trabajadoras no están registradas en la Seguridad Social. En 2017, mediante un experimento de campo, logramos incrementar su tasa de registro en un 8,9%. Hoy continuamos con esa línea, con una campaña en redes sociales que tiene el objetivo de ayudar a estas trabajadoras a hacer realidad sus derechos humanos.
We turn now to our next panel of senior leaders who have been putting vision into practice. A very warm welcome to UNDP Administrator Achim Steiner, UNFPA DED Diene Keita, ASG for Youth Felipe Paullier, and a special guest joining us remotely from Malawi, UN Resident Coordinator Rebecca Adda-Dontoh. A warm welcome to everyone. Diene, we're going to kick off and ask you the first question because UNFPA has recently had a retreat where I understand that you've aligned the whole organization really around UN 2.0 and established a strategic direction around what that means for the organization. Could you elaborate on why UN 2.0 was considered a priority and what concrete steps UNFPA is taking?
Thank you so much, Tanya. I'm very happy to be here. For us, we consider the UN 2.0 as the evolving roadmap for us as an agency towards the collective result that the SG asks from all of us. So what we did at the very, very beginning to ensure that we worked towards the culture initiative. So we had several webinars on the cultural initiative to see what it means for us as cultural, how to make sure that we incorporate that into our context, and then we went to a larger webinar onto the UN 2.0, because it's not only a leadership activity, but to ensure that it trickles down all the way to the organization, to the team everywhere around the world. So I think that was a great success. We work with our colleagues, and the steps to get there is twofold. One, immediately linked to capacity building of our internal team. And the second one, how we implement that towards our programs. So for the team, it's really training to make sure that we discuss with them, we know where they are, and how we can take that forward. And for the programs, it's how we implement the content of change throughout everything. If I take first the world of 8 billion we are in today, so how do we make sure that the demographic shift, you know, the healthy aging, where the young people, how do we make that work together to make a sense to the member state and the people we serve? That's one aspect. And I think we are one of the agencies working as well on scenario for our new strategic plan. You know, we have elaborated 4 different strategic scenarios to make sure that, to see what will work depending on the behavioral science we're using for norm shift, because we all know that for women and girls, for instance, the norms are not their own. You know, it's dictated by their society and their environment. So that's exactly the step we are taking at this stage and see how we move forward. And as I said, it's really evolving and changing, and we're adapting because we are learning from sister agencies as well, you know, depending everyone's specific field.
Absolutely, and I'm so glad it's a perfect segue to say what learning from, you know, ourselves across the UN system and our sister agencies, because as you mentioned, 2 components, operations and programming, and UNDP, Achim, was amongst the first, if not the first, in the family to really look at how to implement this and what UN 2.0 meant for operations and for programming. And I wonder what reflections you have to share with us.
Well, I think first of all, in some ways with the reform of the UN development system, we took a very deliberate decision to focus UNDP's work and also the way we would think about our work on the future of development. And in part that was a deliberate decision also to, in a sense, create an understanding, a culture, a way of thinking about possibilities rather than just failures. Because very often when we look backwards, we talk about targets we have missed, things we have not achieved, and yet every country, every society also has an aspiration. Development should be about aspiration and hope. Now, it's not just a metaphorical term. What then led us to very much home in on some of the things that now UN 2.0 in a sense has brought together as a pathway or as a journey roadmap is, first of all, the understanding of innovation. We often think that UN agencies, programs are somehow, you know, very lethargic, very slow, or not agile institutions. Actually, we wanted to prove the opposite. Innovation, not just as an end in itself, but as a means to an end, led us to establish what is probably the largest network of learning and development today, the Accelerator Labs. Very deliberately focused on bringing in fresh perspectives, fresh talent in our country teams in order to have the time, but also the space in order to engage with local innovators, entrepreneurs, policy reformers, and thereby change the way that UNDP would work. Then digital, the whole possibilities that began to emerge 5-10 years ago, we were slow initially, and then we embraced it. We created a chief digital officer. We then created a whole team that would make UNDP, first of all, digitally more literate, and then also influence the use of digital in our programs. And in 2023, we can see an exponential impact. 70% of our projects now have a digital component. They didn't have that 5-6 years ago. And so the journey continues. We have, as you have also just spoken, Diene, brought in this thinking about scenarios, futures and trends, not to predict the future, but to be more informed about the different futures that countries face and how our program should take advantage of the fact that we have thousands of people working across the whole world. They are signal providers, so we now systematically collect from them the signals they're picking up, and we process them so that we can both feed them back into our work, but also into the next strategic plan, and into the development community at large. But at the end of the day, it also goes down to culture and how an institution and its staff, its colleagues that work in many different locations and cultures can relate to the institutional offering as a whole. We invested in a People for 2030 strategy, a Leaders for 2030 strategy, into sometimes very basic things like moving from a biannual survey of staff to a UNDP Listens architecture, where on multiple occasions in a year, we are, in a sense, asking our staff to provide us feedback. This is immediately processed. Data, digital become, in a sense, extraordinary accelerators here and fed back into the management of individual offices and teams. So a few examples of how technology, but also a view of the future and the role of a UN entity, such as UNDP, the UN Development Programme, really being, at least in terms of aspiration, part of the cutting edge.
Absolutely, and I love how both of you have emphasized culture. It's something that we discussed in the panel just before this one with DSG Amina Mohammed. And part of culture, as you've both alluded to, are the people that we have. And I love also that both of you are reminding us this is very future focused. It's not only whether the UN is sort of future proofing itself, but young people are the ones, of course, whose futures are going to be most impacted and hopefully most benefited. As someone who works for an organization whose mandate is children and young people, I'm so delighted to hear more about your perspective, Felipe, because your focus is on young people.
I do feel that the whole UN 2.0 strategy is extremely related to bringing more young people into this organization. Not only internally, but also as a whole strategy in how we connect with young people. UN 2.0 has to do with having a forward-thinking culture and an organization that is bringing innovation, that it's bringing change constantly and adapting itself. And these 5 big changes the whole strategy proposed are extremely related in how we are continuously being a trustable partner for the whole society, but specifically for young people. So I do feel that at the core of this strategy is how we are a more attractive organization for young people, how we create more spaces for young people to find trust in our organization. No? The whole UN system is based on trust. So I do feel that at the core of this whole strategy, we need to put young people. We are living in a world where half of the population is under 30. It's necessary to bring them into the decision-making table.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned trust because, you know, one of the key places that we as the United Nations earn that trust is what we do on the ground, because that is really where people meet us, if you will, almost face to face. And I think no one better could speak to this than our resident coordinator in Malawi. So Rebecca, you know, you are there actually on the ground. And we'd love to know what some of those experience has been like around the discussions of this UN 2.0 vision. What's your take from there in Malawi?
Thank you very much, Tanya, and greetings from Malawi, the warm heart of Africa. I couldn't agree with Felipe more on the need to be trusted partners of young people. In Malawi, for example, about 80% of the population is under 35 years and over 51% is 18 years and below. This is enormous potential for Malawi's young people to drive change in the country. And of course, as he said, they are the next generation of the UN. Most of us on this panel will reach our sell-by date very soon. So we need to urgently invest more in opening the doors wider for young people. And we have to be intentional about gaining the trust and confidence of young people. And this is what we are trying to do on the ground. So much more could be done. For example, the UN city in Malawi has been leveraging digital and physical platforms to listen, and I stress, to listen to and receive feedback from young people on their aspirations and also expectations of the UN. Listening is critical in building trust, and that is important. So as a result, young people contributed very significantly to the design of our 2024 to 2028 UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework that was signed in November last year. And for instance, we received over 30,000 feedback and comments on Facebook and over 10,000 on Twitter now. And this has enabled us to ensure that youth representation, youth empowerment, all of these are mainstream in the strategic pillars of the cooperation framework.
I love it. I mean, that is just so inspiring and so important to take that learning, that real momentum, and how do we make sure that momentum, those insights, that intentionality is intentionally brought from our different country experiences back into that global discussion. So UN 2.0 cannot just be sort of a headquarters vision, and we cannot lose all these learnings and the momentum and results that we have on the ground. It has to be systematic, and I think UNDP, Achim, you have a lot of experience in thinking around, positioning your country teams for success, particularly with UN 2.0 in mind and a number of the things you mentioned earlier. What are some of the, say, secret sources to provide and sort of support country teams, leaders and others for success?
Well, let me start by, in a sense, looking from the inside out. Our organizations, our teams that are working, to me, two verbs I think are very relevant. It's to liberate and empower. We ask of our staff to work in extraordinarily diverse contexts, sometimes in civil war situations, to essentially work with people on the ground in communities to envisage a future beyond conflict or beyond the next drought or the earthquake when everything was destroyed. So first of all, you have to give your team both the tools. This is where some of the training, the capacity building, digital literacy, understanding how strategic foresight works, behavioral science, but also the ability to think of innovation not as an end in itself. It really is a means to an end, which is something that needs to be defined by the community. And Rebecca used the term listen. I think it's extremely important that an entity such as UNDP or the UN family as a whole also appreciates that in this day and age, development is much about listening and therefore understanding where innovation, progress, change is possible from within a community, a society, a nation, as it is to connect it also to the frontier of possibilities. And I think that's where we both empower our staff, we liberate them to co-create. And this is a term that I think I like very much because it speaks to the work we do every day at a country level or in a global network. But we also recognize that one of the wonderful attributes of the UN is that it literally can connect any country, any community with virtually every other country on the planet in terms of knowledge, best practice, setbacks, and success stories. And I think this is how development also inspires innovation.
And I think it's really a great example, this last one that you brought, which is we must embody the change that we expect and advocate to see in the world, whether it is amongst our staff or particularly, for example, in COP meetings, etc. The final question to each of you, what is one piece of advice that you would give to anyone in the UN family who is just beginning their UN 2.0 journey? Sort of, maybe I think we should start with a youth perspective, Felipe.
So I'm not sure if I feel myself able to give advice, but what I will make is more a reflection. And I do feel that we have been talking about this necessity of some cultural change also, and recognizing also our own capacity and the capacity of our staff in this whole, being the UN historically a pioneer, in promoting good practices and promoting innovation. What I do feel is that in that essence, we need to bring young people as equal partners when we design and we define where are we going as an organization. Creating spaces for meaningful engagement with young people is a clear and a smart decision to take. We are not going to resolve one of the biggest issues that affect young people, such as youth unemployment, if we don't bring them into the conversation as equal partners. Because the understanding young people have of the job market is completely different than the one older generations had. This is an intergenerational dialogue. This needs to be done in an intergenerational approach. So I do feel that creating spaces for meaningful engagement, for me, it's a clear example in this whole road, of coming from and creating a more trustable and a more actual and future-thinking organization.
And I like what you reminded us of, which is perspective. So who you are, but also where you are, changes your perspective on any given topic. And I think, Rebecca, where you are is extremely important because you are where, at the heart of kind of where we want to work. So what is the perspective from the ground on, a piece of advice that you would give to somebody starting their UN 2.0 journey, from any one of our country teams?
Thank you very much. Like Felipe, I also rather reflect. And my first reflection would be, in all of these, in the commitments of 2.0, in the 5 principles, we should be humble enough to respect national knowledge. Where are we coming from and where are we going? That would be the first one. So to engage, and be inclusive in a way that respects national knowledge, and together we can forge forward. That is one of the things. The other thing is also internally, as UN country teams, to really be more collaborative leadership in how we engage with partners. And partnership is critical in the sense that not just with government, but with civil society, with private sector, with academia, using that convening role that we have to bring everybody around the table to ensure that UN 2.0 is being leveraged in a way that scales things up. We've done so much piloting, a lot of things. How are we scaling up? For example, National ID has led Malawi into becoming one of the few African countries that has achieved target 16.9 of SDG 16. And all these are UN 2.0 being leveraged to really scale up things and make sure that there is impact. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And now turning to you, Diene, what would you sort of say is your one piece of advice to someone starting on that or early in that 2.0 journey?
Please allow me to say one thing before that. I love everything that I've heard here, from carbon footprint, that we need to all work on it, and we are doing it, to take into the youth into consideration, and the national ownership at the country level. My advice is the following. You know, we are UN team. This is for our colleagues as well. We have a wealth of experience in the United Nations organization. So I'm asking all of us, wherever we sit, really to embrace the change, because everyone counts, to embrace the change, to open up and make this exercise a fun and forward-looking one for all of us, because the solution lies inside with all our partners, and we can make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'll give the last word to you, Achim.
I think very much in the same vein. We have to always be careful when we try to, reform, bring innovation into an institution, that we don't create the sense that there are some people who belong to the future and the rest are somehow all behind. Understand that in our institutions, everybody is potentially an agent of change. The question is, what means do we give them? What possibilities do we afford them? And how does the institution also reward and incentivize and support people to, take any of these UN 2.0 elements and put them into practice? And I think the other part that has been very important for our learning journey, begin to think more in systems. When we talk digital, we now have a focus on how do we help countries build digital ecosystems, not how to get more fiber optic cable and more devices into people's hands, but how do you help a country build a digital ecosystem? At the same time, a project that, for instance, is about enabling people to have access to clean and affordable energy could also be a gender-driven and defined project in which energy is a contributing factor. And particularly to an organization like UNDP, but it's true for many of us, we have at any point in time probably around 4,000 to 5,000 projects that we manage worldwide. We need to overcome the fact that we are often funded to implement projects when really we're trying to help governments to develop systems, economic systems, social safety systems, digital ecosystems. We need to approach this with a portfolio perspective. We may have to work with differently funded projects, but it doesn't mean that we have to implement them as if they are separate chambers of operation. And nowhere is this more true than in the UN 2.0 agenda, because it is about leveraging technology, insight, lessons learned, and apply it to the work we do with people in country, globally, and particularly to the benefit of the next generation. I think your point also, Felipe, bring young people in. They are not beneficiaries, they are actors, and they are also agents of change. And I think more so than ever, technology at the moment and innovation has become associated with the skills that young people bring into it. And our Accelerator Labs network was very interesting because it allowed us to bring in about 300 young people, young defined by, somewhere between 25 to 35, who otherwise probably would never have come into the UN. But because we created the Accelerator Labs as a platform in which they could pursue their vision and dream of development linked to a UN organization, we created, I think, the best of both worlds.
Fantastic. And I love that piece about creating the best of both worlds for everyone in this world. So a hearty thank you to everyone, Rebecca, Felipe, Diene, and Achim, for your time and your insights on what it really means in a very concrete way that I think all of us can relate to put UN 2.0 into action. And as the SG said, UN 2.0 is about everyone, everywhere. And these examples of what that actually means in practice can inspire all of us that regardless of where we sit, we equally have the opportunity, whether in a country team or at headquarters, to get onto the journey and to make a difference and be a key part of this transformation and change in the UN. Here's a video from High Commissioner Volker Turk on how OHCHR is leveraging UN 2.0.
UN 2.0 is a fantastic opportunity to reshape our ways of working so that they align with the realities of the world around us and the principles that are the bedrock of our work. Let me point to one of the lessons of our commemoration last year of the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It resounded with demands that demonstrated clearly that the majority, usually the silent majority, is strongly attached to rights. In that light, and guided by the UN 2.0 approach, my office is working on new strategies to build up our capacity to handle the challenges that humanity is facing. We're strengthening our support to teams in country and regional offices, setting up new frameworks for innovation, analytics, and strategic foresight, and using behavioral science insights to strengthen our outreach to young people and others. We in the UN can contribute to preventing human rights harms. We can help to protect people whose rights are threatened. Our work can propel effective and principled solutions that are grounded in the universal rights of people. In fact, it must. I thank all of you for bringing your ideas and energy to this task, and I hope to see you at our side event on how UN 2.0 can drive greater impact for rights.
Let's take a deeper dive into digital, one of the quintet of change for UN 2.0.
This is Tyler.
And this is Thais. We work for the UN mission in South Sudan.
I work in the Joint Operations Center, and we're continuously looking for ways to improve information flows, such as the digitization of the mission reporting processes. This involves working closely with Thais in the business analytics and compliance section.
Exactly, and using Power Automate, we standardize and optimize the generating and the storing of the daily situation report, allowing to use the unstructured data for analytics and informed decision making.
Let's take a look at foresight in this video.
My name is Elena Diaz-Pinto from the Latin American Institute for Economic and Social Planning of UN ECLAC. We are promoting foresight for development by providing technical assistance, conducting applied research, and working in the elaboration of flexible tools to be used by countries and territories in the region according to their specific contexts and possibilities.
In our third panel, we're examining the next steps and implementation plan for UN 2.0. Let's welcome from the Secretary-General's Office, the Director of Strategic Planning and Monitoring Unit, Ayaka Suzuki, and Teleo von Lupen from UN Global Pulse. Welcome to you both. Now, we've heard a lot about the importance and the great potential of UN 2.0 for the United Nations, the Sustainable Development Goals, and for member states. I'm brought in. I'm totally excited, not only because I work in a number of these areas, but because that vision is just so inspiring for a future-focused, future-ready UN. So, Ayako, can we kick off with some of your thoughts on what the next steps are going to be? How are we all going to get there?
Thank you. So we're all very excited because so much is already happening. So the question really is, what's next? So we are already moving forward, and as you already heard from previous speakers, there's so much that's happening. right? There is digital tools for education, innovation for financial inclusion, foresight to adapt to climate change, but clearly there's much, much more to do. So we're here really to talk about how to make sure that we move from these lighthouse initiatives to more systemic change. As you heard USG Ryder earlier, who said we need to go from retail to wholesale. Mm-hmm. So we need to go from anecdotes to really embedding this in our culture and the way we do things. So to do that, we need to integrate UN 2.0 in every UN organization's strategic plans, and also at the level of country teams and the regional level to empower all the colleagues to be able to do UN 2.0 in their own respective work areas.
Fantastic. And, you know, imagine all of these things that we're talking about, they're systemic. So there are, you know, about individual actions and how those roll together no matter where you sit. And I think some of those are really about grassroots actions, right, as well. So how does the grassroots actions become part of the systemic ones and inspire further grassroots actions? So Paullier, I think you have a couple of thoughts around what are those grassroots actions? What might they look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, if we ask what we are really here to do, it's not about building skills and building tools for their own sake, but it's all about making the work of every team across the UN family more impactful. And the scope of that is huge. We have more than 100,000 colleagues working all around the world, and many of them on the ground and hand in hand with the communities that we serve, which means that those are the experts. Those are the people who know exactly what is needed on the ground. And now UN 2.0 needs to also be taking this action from the grounds up and learning from these experts and from real situations. And like picture this, if you're working in a country, in an environment where extreme weather conditions or earthquakes are common, then you're exactly the expert on what is going to be needed after some crisis like that hits. So imagine what you can do if now, in addition to that, you can also use real-time data in order to make the right decisions and be there faster and in a more targeted way. That's exactly the type of change that we are talking about. And so the good news is that we are making it a lot easier for people to get in on it. We've built these amazing, vivid communities of practice across all of the UN 2.0 areas on data, on digital, on foresight, on innovation, that are already connecting more than 20,000 people across the UN. And it's essentially a space to broaden the horizon of what's possible and out there, and then make the relevant connections to experts to get projects off the ground. And of course, we are really hoping that much of you are jumping in and join us there.
Absolutely. So I think a concrete action, if we have colleagues who have not joined up already to one or more of those communities, that's one next best step that someone can take. Now, Jaco, you mentioned lighthouse projects, by which I think you mean, you know, ones that can really be inspiring, they can be beacons of kind of direction, of guidance, and ones also, though, that we can learn from and you know, replicate and adopt and adapt in a much more sort of systematic way. Can you tell us about, you know, what that sort of moving from lighthouse to more systematic implementation, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge that while we have a common playbook, frame of reference, the policy brief, everybody's journey will be different. Every organization will have their own roadmap because you are at different stages of developing these capabilities, different mandates, what you do. So there's no one size fits all, right? So it will need a lot of tailoring to the needs of every entity of the organization. But we have identified some key drivers for action, and there are common elements for this kind of systematic change to take place, and that is how we hire, how we train, how we shift budgets and resources, and how we do our programs. So there are some common elements, and so for example, let's look at how to build new skills, right? One of the key positive change that was introduced over the last few years is the creation of a new job family of data scientists. So that's one way of adjusting job profiles. And as a result of having this new job family, at least in the Secretariat, 2 years ago, you couldn't hire data scientists even if you wanted to. And now we have hundreds of colleagues doing data scientist work in the Secretariat. And that was not possible before. And UNDP Administrator Achim Steiner talked about how UNDP's offerings now, program offerings, 75% are digital, right? So it really is so important to be able to do this kind of shifting of the way we hire, the way we offer programs. And on learning, I just talked about the communities of practice. I highly encourage all of you to sign up because there's so many interesting things happening. And by empowering our colleagues, we can start delivering more innovative programs and then, of course, cooperation frameworks at the country level and projects across everything we do. But obviously, change is tough and it's not going to be overnight. So we know that we will need to continuously see how we're progressing as a whole. So one way that we do it is by measuring progress over time, and so that every UN entity knows where they stand and how they can do more, how individuals in organization can do more, and how we can learn from each other.
In addition to the communities of practice, what is one other thing that they can do, or more than one other thing they can do, to get involved today?
I mean, maybe before turning to concrete next steps, there's just one thing I also want to highlight. Something that might be a bit more soft, but I think equally important in this whole implementation, which is that next to building new programs, we really need to change the way how we work together and the way how we are being with each other. And maybe to share a little bit of my own kind of perspective and journey in here, I'm in comparison still pretty young in this environment, and I might have come from a background that might not be the traditional one into the UN. And working within the Secretary-General's Innovation Lab and Strategy team, I've found this amazing space where I can come in with my skills and with my background and ideas and find a place that's not only encouraging my ideas, but really also pushing me to grow. But here's the thing, I wouldn't have been able to work and have an impact in that way if it wasn't in a team that's constantly open to new ideas and also sometimes okay with taking a risk. So what I think for UN 2.0 to really take off, every single team within the UN needs to create a place where especially our younger colleagues and those coming in with new skills feel that it's a place where they can thrive and shine.
That's great, Talea. And I'm wondering, Ayaka, any final thoughts?
So yes, for everybody watching, please attend as many UN 2.0 week events as possible. And once again, please join the communities of practice, begin your learning journey, and everybody, try to think what you can do differently. I think that by now we convinced you that we need to do this. This is part of an essential evolution of the UN so that UN remains relevant for today's and tomorrow's world. And we need all of you to make that happen.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ayaka and Talea. That brings to a close our high-level opening of UN 2.0 week. From me, Tanya Akoni, it has been a great pleasure to be your host. But also to remind you that this does not end your opportunities, it's just the beginning. This entire week, as you just heard, we have a fantastic lineup of events. And how do you RSVP and find the schedule? Please go online to week.un-TWO-ZERO.network. That's where you'll find the full schedule and opportunities to sign up for events that cover every thematic area that you'll find interesting. So again, thank you and welcome to UN 2.0 Week.